Okay, well, I hope you've all got Eccles cakes and bits of parking to munch on during the meeting. Is there a north-south divide? And I want to say three things, really, and I'll just say them at the beginning and then go through them. Is there a north-south divide? Well, yes, sort of. That might sound a bit vague, but it raises the question, well, what is the north, you know? The second thing I want to say is class is the main division in society. And we need a united fight back, north and south, if we're going to win. And the third thing I want to talk about is what sort of party do we need? You know, it was horrible hearing about Jeremy Corbyn today, you know, not even allowed to be an MP who's leading the party and had millions of supporters, you know, less than a year ago. So do we need a party that focuses on the electoral parameters in society, or do we need a different sort of party now? Is it time to be talking once again and building a Marxist party based on theory and intervention in the class struggle? Okay, so that's the three sort of things that I'm going to say, and I just want to start then. So what is the North? Now, for the Tories, there are a layer of Tory MPs who have been elected, and they've set up a northern, like, Tory group. And they want to, they say it's all about making sure for them that the levelling up agenda that Boris Johnson said that he was going to implement is implemented, you know, that there will be investment and infrastructure and jobs in the north. And we've had like a year of the Tory government and we've had mass unemployment, even more unemployment, sadly, to come, and no sign of any investment. But there has been a levelling. There has been a levelling up, and that's been from the bottom of society. The poorest people have been paying more, and the people at the top of society, the richest people, have actually increased their share of wealth and their absolute wealth during this whole period of the pandemic. Now, for a whole number of Labour councillors in the north, for the mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, and the 10 council leaders, the north has been badly discriminated against. That is what they say. And it's true. I mean, it's really highlighted most just about a month ago when Greater Manchester was in one of these tiers, and then the Tories told the people in Greater Manchester and the councils that they were going to offer a furlough scheme, but it would be at 66% of wages, not 80%. And Burnham, you know, famously stood outside the Peters, you know, on Peter Square outside the library and said, we need 80%. And it was, no, you can't have that. It's not affordable. Why don't you, Andy Burnham, why don't you speak a bit more like Karma Starmer, you know? That was the allegation towards him and all those that supported him. And what happened a week later, Sunak, the Chancellor, gives a national furlough scheme for everyone at 80%. Now, the Greater Manchester Mayor, or rather the Greater Manchester Mayor-led combined authority, it doesn't really have much political power. People, what I mean by this, I know I have friends who've moved up from London, and they go, well, where do you buy an Oyster card? And I'm like, what's an Oyster card? You know, like one of them cards that you can get on all the buses and the trams and the trains, and they all links together, right? We don't have one in Greater Manchester. We have, I don't know, I think it's about 20 privatised bus companies. And the truth is that the mayor can't bring in an Oyster card system because he would need a further legislation, an act of parliament. The mayor of Greater Manchester doesn't control the schools or the hospitals, nor even the police, even though he is the head of the police and crime commissioner. The councils in the north, it has been alleged, have been cut more in terms of, you know, money given to councils. Manchester, Liverpool, Hull, massive cuts, unbelievable cuts over the last 10 years. But there's also councils in the south that have been cut and have low income, Islington, Tower Hamlets in London and others. But it is true that across the country, Tory councils everywhere have been cut less. Just to look at this historically, so I think it's 30 years ago, it might be more, that it is a lot more actually, isn't it? That the Thatcher government brought in a legislation and said there are no longer going to be any more council houses built. And this had a political logic for her, because she believed that if you live in a council house, you're most likely going to vote Labour. And one of her favourite, council leaders, Dame Shirley Porter, took this to its most extreme in London and organised gerrymandering. You were interviewed, and if you sounded like you were a Labour voter, you didn't get a house, a council house. But if you said, you sounded like a Tory voter, you would. The gerrymandering was so open, and it was, she got caught out and ended up going to court, and then I think she had to move to Australia. But essentially, the political logic is the same. Celia, I can see your face, but not mine. Is that right? Is that okay? Anyway, okay. So, what happens now, or what has happened in the last recent years, is that there is now a formula that the government have created that favours Tory councils with funding over Labour councils, and it's still done in a sort of gerrymandering type way, but it's not as open as it was before. Now we're going to face even more cuts, even more council cuts, and a whole number of councils are starting to become, in terms of money, in a really, really bad way. Historically, we saw in the 1920s, the Poplar Council in London involved in mass resistance with strikes, with rent strikes, with rate capping strikes. They ended up being caught, they went to prison, they carried on and fought from prison, and they won. But what was key to their success was mass mobilisation of unions and workers. But we also have seen, historically, in the 1980s, there were a whole string of councils, about 110 councils actually, that were that defied the Tories over their rate capping policy, but they only defied them in words. They didn't do it in deeds. 110 councils said they were going to defy the Tories. Manchester was one of them. They all, in the end, collapsed. Liverpool fought on and really did defy the Tories and had a mass struggle, but they then capitulated and settled during the middle of the miners' strike in 1984, 1985. Now, we don't know what's going to happen next with councils and with the national government, but if there is any conflict, any struggle between a local council and the national government, we always will back the local against the national. We want to weaken the national government as much as possible. But the way that we fight isn't one that we could leave in the hands of the leaders of the councils. The second thing I said I was going to talk about was that it's about class and not about geography. That's the division in society, a class division. When you say the north, I always like to say, how far north? Does Scotland included in the north? Well, yes, it is obviously geographically, but politically the north is about the north of England. It's not about the north of Ireland. It is a vague political category, and it's a type of shorthand. When people talk about the north, it's to do with the north and councils, but it's not about Knutsford, it's not about Cheshire, because these are rich bits in the north. Now, I want to sort of look back in history a bit to shine a bit of a light on trying to understand this question of the north, because the working class and the development of the working class, it follows the contours of capitalist development, and it's constantly in change. Next week, we've got a special meeting on Engels, but if you were in Manchester at the time of Engels, in 1842, when he came, Manchester was one of the richest centres of a capital accumulation in the country, with the textile mills and the factories, Manchester goods, the cotton fabric that was produced. It was sent all over the world. On King Street, there was a stock exchange and a Bank of England. It was a really rich part of the country. But along with the riches was some very poor people who worked in the mills, and both those that worked in the mills here and those that picked the cotton in the southern plantations in the south of America, in the Caribbean, were exploited. The mill workers and the slaves were exploited, and the money went to the richest in society, because it was a capitalist logic of development. Today, We don't any longer have in Manchester, like we did in the 1970s, say Trafford Park and a great big manufacturing base. The economy, if you can call it that, in Manchester is really focused now on workers in councils, in hospitals, universities, hotels, foods, and at the airport. Now, whether it's safety at work or pay cuts or job losses or the effects of privatisation, these problems are experienced by all workers, whether they live in north, south, east or west. Let's sort of flesh this out a bit. The People Before Profit Emergency Action Programme isn't a northern programme, it's a national emergency programme for jobs, services, safety and opposing scapegoating. The Black Lives Matter movement, there's no division between the north and the south. We're building solidarity with our brothers across America and we're opposing racism at home. The riots that there were following the killing by the police of Mark Duggan started in Brixton, but they spread to Liverpool, Manchester, Salford, Birmingham and elsewhere. Just over a year ago, we had some really inspiring youth strikes for climate and the whole environmental movement that we're involved in. It's not a national movement, never mind a regional movement, it's a global movement. Extinction Rebellion North, that, you know, I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the Northern Rebellion, but XR North is about supporting all of XR. And they went down to protest in the capital, London, and everyone in XR has a global perspective, a planetary perspective. To win, working class unity is absolutely essential in any struggle. And if workers are divided, or if the struggle is confined to a struggle in the North, we won't win. It's just not possible to win. So I do think that we have to, if you like, I'll put it this way, you have to be cautious of talking about the North, because it can be a bit like throwing sand in your eyes. You can't see. The sand is real. There are real, you know, cuts and deficiencies in provision to lots of councils and areas in the North. But the real divide is class. And if you get confused about this and focus on the North, then you're not going to see the real division in society, which is one between different classes. And it's about a system that we live in, which is based on class exploitation. Now, I think the third thing I wanted to say was about raising the question about what sort of party does the working class need today? Because we need to change the system. It's never been clearer that there is systemic change which is needed. And that idea is politically gaining more and more of an audience, because we've got at the moment an absolutely incredible and frightening in many ways triple failure of the system. We've got COVID, we've got the economy, and we've got climate catastrophe. These are massive problems and they need big solutions. And in this situation, it's really crucial and important that we provide a political lead. Socialists need to explain the world and we need political clarity. And we need that so we can then focus resistance where it is best, and that is in opposition to exploitation and oppression. Now, for the last 4 years, we've had a Jeremy Corbyn-led Labour Party, and he won millions of supporters, and it was really inspiring. Change, you know, hope, you know, a different sort of government will be possible, a better world is possible. But, you know, yesterday Corbyn once again, unfortunately, apologised. I don't know how many times he's apologised for saying what everyone knows is true, that anti-Semitism in the Labour Party was exaggerated as a political stick to try and weaken and silence the Labour left. Starmer is focused really clearly on fighting the left and Jeremy Corbyn. He's not about fighting or opposing even the Johnson government. Now, the problems that Corbyn is in at the moment isn't just about the strength or weakness or courage or backbone of Labour personalities. It's because the political logic of reformism that seeks to change things within the system isn't able to change the system. We've had similar parties to the one that Corbyn led, left parties in the Spanish state, Podemos, and in Greece, and they did get elected, but they capitulated, they surrendered, they failed, and it didn't work. Parties that are based upon and prioritise the electoral struggle aren't capable of leading our class against a ruthless capitalist class. And it is ruthless, you know, on every level. There is no parliamentary road to socialism. You know, I think that's something that we haven't said for a while, but I think it's clearer now to many people than it has been for a while. Now, that's not to say that Labour members and politicians are not part of the struggles and the campaigns. Of course they are. It's great to hear that in a couple of weeks, John McDonnell is going to be speaking at another national meeting of the People Before Profit, group. Diane Abbott is the national chair of Stand Up to Racism. Excellent, you know, it makes it stronger. The more MPs like her that are involved, the better. Andy Burnham last year spoke at the Stand Up to Racism Holocaust Memorial event, and I do hope that he comes to the one that's going to be organised for this year or in the new year in January. But the question is, what sort of political organisation do we need today? And the Socialist Workers' Party that we're part of and are in is from a different tradition from the Labour type parties. For us, socialism is built out of the struggles from below, and we need a party that is centred on the actual class struggle. I'll give an example what I mean by this. The student struggle today. The Storm Centre is in Owens Park, and we'll hear a bit more about this from the students in the second part of the meeting. It'd be really exciting. It was good to hear that Labour MP for Gorton, Afzal Khan, spoke to the university bosses and got the internet turned back on. And it was good that Afzal Khan met with students in the occupation yesterday. He had a little Zoom call with them. Great. But he's not championing their struggle. He's not trying to spread the struggle. He's trying to end an unfortunate situation. But our comrades are not doing that. They are seeking and are actually spreading the struggle. And it was great to hear that in Bristol, I hope I'm right on this, that students have gone into occupation. I was thinking about this today, you know, a handful of comrades today can make more effect than a handful of MPs. That hasn't always been the case, but it is at the moment. We're in an extraordinary situation. The Socialist Workers' Party is a party working for revolutionary change, and we're about explaining the world, providing political clarity. I'll just give one more example about the sort of discussions that are going on. Today or this morning, Andy Burnham was complaining that the system we have in Britain, it's too London-centric. What does London-centric mean? Well, look at Kensington, that's part of London. In Kensington, we've got South Kensington, where's the royal parks and luxury housing, and North Kensington, where there's Grenfell. The divisions there isn't about the North and South, it's about rich and poor. London-centric can often mean Westminster Parliament, but the political power isn't only in Parliament. What about the City of London and the banks and the speculators, the headquarters of the oil companies, the police chiefs, the judges? They all operate out of London. But it's about them leading their class, the ruling class, and our side needs to start acting as a class. So our focus is on the fight back. We are never having a perspective as revolutionaries that's regional or even national. We are building international solidarity. So to conclude and just say, there is a north-south divide, but the north is a vague concept. Class is the main division in society, not geography. And the task for socialists today, and the necessity, I think, for all of us today, is to build the sort of party that provides political clarity, that is focused on building united resistance. And so I'd urge you, if you're not a member, consider joining. If you are a member, think about asking people to join, because now more than ever, we need a party like the SWP. Okay.